Hello, welcome to the Lions Awaken show. I am Matthew Detweiler.
And I'm Caleb Bavanka.
And today we have a special guest with us, Nicholas Papanicolaou. Thanks for being on the show. It's really good to have you on here. It's an honor. And you're a very interesting, complex man in a good way. So if you just want to introduce yourself and tell our audience who you are, a little bit about yourself.
Certainly. Well, I've had a career in business as a ship owner and also at one point as a car manufacturer and majority shareholder of a company called Aston Martin Lagonda in England in the 80s. We managed to turn that company around. But now, in the latter stages of my life, I have the honor of leading the Sovereign Order of St. John of Jerusalem, which is also commonly known as the Knights of Malta. And I also write books on matters that affect Christianity and such as the separation of church and state in America, and also the attacks by the forces of Islam against Christianity in America and around the world. So, and I also teach here at Morningstar University master's degree candidates in the for the master's degree in Christian leadership.
Okay.
Sweet deal.
Wow.
So you're the Prince Grand Master of the Knights of Malta, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so do you want to just tell us about kind of your order, the history of it, what they've done, what they are currently doing now, just all about it?
Certainly, that's a long question that deserves a long answer, but it's the longest existing, continually operating Christian order in the world. It was founded in 1054 in Jerusalem, and its original mission was to protect Christian pilgrims that were going to the Holy Land and were being attacked by Muslims. And so, these were weary travelers that would finally make it from, Europe all the way into Jerusalem, and then they would be attacked. So to begin with, the order had a military character, but that then evolved into what became known as the hospitaller character of the order. The word hospital is actually Latin and French, and up until the time of the Knights, it meant a large building that was like a small palace. And because of the Knights, the meaning of the word was transformed into what it is today, a facility that provides care, health care.
Oh, wow.
So the Knights had set up their hospital in Jerusalem, and so at that point they started to also obviously have a charitable function, but they were famous, and people still have some difficulty understanding the true character of the order today. But so, for example, the Knights would fight pitched battles against the forces of Islam here and there, in the Middle East, and by night, the same Knights that had fought on the battlefield during the day would return to the battlefield and pick up the Muslim wounded, whom their fellow Muslims had abandoned to die, and bring them to their hospital and treat them, and then release them.
Oh, wow.
And so the motto of the order, or the creed of the order, was always love the person, hate the crime. And that's what they practiced. So they would fight the battle, but then they loved the person, and they would actually help restore him to health. So it's the longest continually operating Christian order in the world. And today, after 970 odd years of existence, there are various offshoots of the order. We are the true direct descendant of the order, both historically and in its spirit. And why do I say that? Because in 1048 AD, when the order was founded in Jerusalem, there was the whole Christian church was one unified ecumenical church. There was no Catholic church, there was no Orthodox church, much less a Protestant church, which, as we know, was founded by Martin Luther later in the 16th century. So the order was open to all Christians. Now, today, there are various offshoots. One of the offshoots is the order that is under the Vatican, which is exclusively for Catholics. And that, we feel, is not true to the original character of the order, because, as I say, the character of the order was Christian ecumenical. So we are the only Christian ecumenical order. And we have in the order as knights and dames both Orthodox and Catholic and Protestant and evangelical Christians. There's also another order which was founded much, much later by Queen Victoria in England, and it's the British Order, which goes by the name of the most venerable order of the Hospital of St. John. And what is our function today? I'll give it to you in a nutshell. We continue to believe that the primary function of the order is to defend Christianity and Judeo-Christian values. And that is what I generally call advocacy. Advocacy for Judeo-Christian values and for persecuted Christians and for Christian values, etc. So that continues to be the main function of the order. And the secondary function, which is what happened historically, as I've explained before, is charity. So what does advocacy consist of in the modern world? Well, it consists of various knights that we have who are, of course, very well versed in history and in Christianity, in the Bible, who write books, give speeches, appear on television, always defending Judeo-Christian values and defending Christianity and drawing attention to persecuted Christians and so forth. So advocacy continues to be our main function.
And, and that's worldwide, right?
Worldwide, okay. Yes, worldwide. But what examples can I give you of that? For example, some people may have heard of General Jerry Boykin, who retired as a 3-star general, commanded all United States Special Forces. Before that, he had commanded the famous Delta Force, and in fact was one of the founding or one of the original members of the Delta Force. Incredible American hero, was on the Iran hostage rescue mission, personally arrested President Noriega of Panama in his capital city. You know, he just walked up to him and took him in his custody. Has done incredible feats. And if you all remember the movie Black Hawk Down.
Great movie.
He was a commander on the ground. They changed his name in the movie, but he was the commander on the ground. So General Boykin is very frequently on television, etc., and he doesn't, when he appears, he doesn't say, I am a Knight of Malta or a Knight of St. John of Jerusalem, which is actually the correct name of the order, but he continues to hit the target about Judeo-Christian values and Christian values and so forth. So that's one example of advocacy. Another example of advocacy that I can give you is another one of our senior knights, who actually runs 500 missionaries around the world, many of them in Muslim countries. And so there they are, you know, in a hostile environment and, preaching the Bible in Muslim nations. I don't want to go into it any further, but there are 500 of them. One of those was became rather famous and came to the attention of the media. His name was Andrew Brunson. And if you remember, he was placed in prison in Turkey by President Erdogan.
Yeah.
He is not a knight in the order, but the guy that runs that whole network and operation is very much a knight in the order. Okay. Gotcha. Another example of advocacy is, for example, you may have heard of it, the publication called Movie Guide, which is based in Los Angeles. It was founded by another one of our knights who continues to head it up today, some 25 years ago, with the intent of bringing back Christian values into Hollywood. And so if you've noticed, you know, this is long, tedious, disciplined work. But if you've noticed in the last 7-10 years, there are many more movies with Christian content that are coming out of Hollywood than there used to be before, thanks to Movie Guide.
Wow, that's awesome.
Who rates them and has acquired so much influence in Hollywood that producers and directors and will come to the founder of Movie Guide, who continues to run it, Dr. Ted Baer, with a script and say, would you please review it and tell us what changes you would like to make or additions you would like to make. And of course, he's always making additions that have to do with family values, Judeo-Christian values, etc. And yet another example of advocacy is another one of our senior knights who was born in Indonesia and came to Christ, emigrated to America, set up a ministry, and he has methodically over the last 10, 15 years funneled at least $100 million worth of medical supplies and medicines back to Indonesia, but exclusively to Muslims.
Oh. Wow.
And so when I asked him and I said, well, why exclusively to Muslims? He said that that's what the Lord led him to do. And he said, but by the way, when I go and visit my house in Indonesia, there is a group of 200 imams who come to my house and secretly pray to Jesus Christ.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So
That's
that's another example of advocacy. It involves, in this case, also humanitarian aid, but really it's about advocacy. So, and then we have knights that, write books that have been, quite successful and widely read. So all of that I put together under the title of advocacy, which, as I say, remains the primary function of the order. So I hope I've given you sort of in a nutshell what the order does.
Yeah, it takes courage to be a knight, because the knights, to advocate the Christian faith is to confront all the main evils, basically. And that's what you're doing. And you're doing that in all 7 mountains, like in every area of life.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Which is very important today, to speak truth in those areas. So that's amazing. And it's just, I guess that is a really good example of a modern knight. And, you're fighting with the spiritual sword still today, which is more important than ever.
Well, we're very much guided. If you remember the Last Supper, there is a point where Jesus says to the apostles, if you do not have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. What does that mean? We know that even when Jesus spoke those words, he didn't mean buy a sword so you can cut people's heads off. And the proof of that is that only hours later, he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, if you remember.
That's right, yeah.
And the Pharisees come to arrest him with Judas, and Peter pulls out his machete. It was more like a machete, and cuts off the ear of one of the servants of the chief priest. And Jesus rebukes him, and he says, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. So we have him at the Last Supper saying, if you do not have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. And hours later, rebuking somebody that's actually using the physical sword. So when you put those two things together, the inevitable conclusion is that what Jesus is talking about is, I'm sending you out as spiritual soldiers. I'm sending you out to stand your ground against the enemies of my enemies and the enemies of God. And that is a function that the order very much continues to perform today. We do not cede our ground. Now, over its 1,000-year history, the order did fight physical battles against the forces of Islam, and did so not only in the Holy Land, but later on the island of Rhodes in Greece, which was sort of on the frontier between the Christian Europe and Islamic Middle East. And it was there from the 1300s to the 1500s. And then it moved its base, its headquarters to Malta, which is why it became known as the Knights of Malta, and defended Christianity there in pitched battles against the Ottoman Empire, which of course was an Islamic empire. So it does have in its history, a track record of also defending with arms Christianity. But as I say, today it's a spiritual advocacy, and of course we stand our ground against the enemies of Christ.
That's right. How many members are in this order worldwide?
The order historically, from its founding, had between 500 and 700 knights. Okay. And we continue to be around that number, around 700. We are not interested in numbers. We are interested in really committed Christians.
Right.
Gotcha.
The quality of the knights.
Quality, yeah.
Because if you're in that position fighting the evils, you got to be committed. and it takes
Right.
courage.
And we all know also from the readings of the Bible that it's not the numbers that count. If you remember the story of Gideon,
That's right. 300.
you know, with tens of thousands of army, and the Lord said to him, you don't need them, get rid of them, pare it down.
Yeah.
And so he pared it down, and the Lord told him again, pare it down some more, and finally he pared it down to 300 and defeated their enemies. And the greatest example of all, of course, advocating or giving an example that it's not the numbers that count, is Jesus himself. He says, I will have 12 apostles and wait and see what I will do.
And they changed the world.
Right. So it's not the numbers that count.
Exactly.
Go ahead. Do you have a question?
Well, I was just going to say, so regarding the Knights of Malta, like their main enemy throughout the century has been Islam.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of today, like how does Islam, is it compatible with the U.S. Constitution, with the Western values still, or is it completely not? Like how does that fit in right now?
Well, let's speak some truths here. You know, I often hear the word radical Islam and moderate Islam. There is no such thing. The Quran is only one, and it says what it says. And the three pillars of Islamic theology are the Quran, then the Hadith, which is the contemporaneous accounts by Muhammad's closest generals and servants of how he reacted and how he treated certain situations while he was alive. And then the Sunnah, which is the book that sets forth the examples of how to do things that Muhammad said in his own life. There is a basic tenet in Islam that Muhammad led the perfect life, blessed life, and so that everything he did, if you emulate, if you do the same thing, you're blessed. So here's where the problem arises. His last wife was Aisha, whom he married when she was 6.
Yikes.
And by his own admission, consummated the marriage when she was 9.
Wow.
So he was having sex with a 9-year-old girl. Well, if you're a devout Muslim and you do the same thing, you're blessed. Muhammad had slaves. So if you're a devout Muslim today and you have slaves, you're doing just what Muhammad did, and so you're blessed. And it's not me just saying that. Even as we speak, there is an assistant professor, Brown, at Georgetown University, who teaches just that.
Wow.
That there's nothing morally reprehensible with human slavery. And he says outright, he says, Muhammad, absolutely. I have it on video. And, you know, imagine this, Georgetown University, which is was founded by Jesuits. And so Assistant Professor Brown, who's a Muslim, converted to Islam, is openly teaching that there's nothing morally reprehensible with human slavery. So when we bring all of this within the context of the United States Constitution, is Islam, and I'm not saying radical Islam or moderate Islam, I repeat, there's only one Islam, and it sets forward what it is all about. Islam is not compatible with the United States Constitution. It is not compatible on matters such as human slavery. It is not compatible with regard to the treatment of women. There is, for example, in the Quran, chapter 4, verse 34, is a teaching on the correct way to beat your wife. And the precepts in Islam are that you cannot cause her to bleed, you cannot beat her about the face, and you cannot beat her in public. But short of that, if everything under her jalabaya, her whole body is black and blue, you can do that. And so there's another provision in the Quran that says that in a legal proceeding, the testimony of 2 women is necessary to balance the testimony of 1 man. So institutionally, in that religion, a woman is assigned a role that is equivalent to half a man. And that amounts really to the debasement of women.
Yep.
There is a teaching in Islam that says that you must take homosexuals to a high place and then drop them from that place, kill them. So, which is what explains why in Muslim countries, if they discover somebody who's a homosexual, they take him to the top of a building and throw him off. And so all of these teachings are not, and practices, so we're not only talking about abstract theories, we're also talking about the practices of Islam,
That's right.
are not compatible with the United States Constitution. Now, we know that anytime the forces of Islam are challenged about these teachings and practices, they claim freedom of religion. But in our country, in the United States of America, there is a long track record of United States Supreme Court decisions which in fact limit freedom of religion. And I'll give you a couple of hard examples. 1878, there was a landmark case, Reynolds versus the United States. Who was Reynolds? He was a high official in the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church, as we all know, preaches bigamy and polygamy.
Yep.
So Mr. Reynolds went out and married a second wife while he was married to his first wife, purposely to prove a point. And of course, he was sued by the district attorney for bigamy. And in his defense, he invoked freedom of religion. What did the United States Supreme Court do? It said, oh, no, you don't. You can't do that. Your freedom of religion ends where our common laws, which emanate from the Constitution, begin. So your freedom of religion can come up just to that boundary of our common laws, but if you violate our common laws, then you go to jail. And they sent him to jail. The most recent case on limits of freedom of religion was actually in 1987, and it was a case Smith versus Oregon State Unemployment Agency. And you know, these limits on freedom of religion come up sometimes through the strangest cases. So what was the case here? There was a Mr. Smith and 2 or 3 of his friends who were members of the so-called Native American church. And they were constantly stoned on peyote. And so they were fired by their employer in Oregon. And they put in a claim for unemployment benefits. And they were denied by the Oregon Unemployment, whatever it's called, employment agency or whatever. They were denied unemployment benefits. And the reason was because they had caused their own firing through their behavior.
Right.
So they sued. They brought suit. And the case eventually came to the United States Supreme Court. And they claimed, again, freedom of religion. They said, we're members of the Native American Church. Our church blesses and accepts peyote, so we were doing nothing wrong. We're protected under the First Amendment. What did the United States Supreme Court do? Once again, it said peyote is a prescribed substance in the state of Oregon. You're not entitled to consume it whenever you like, only by prescription by a doctor. You were consuming it freely and openly, and therefore you were violating our common laws. Therefore, you are denied unemployment benefits. So the point here is that when you read the teachings and the practices of Islam and I've outlined for you just a few areas, but there are many, many more, they violate our Constitution and our common laws, which emanate honor killings, for example. You know, when a father kills his own daughter because she dared to date a Christian or an infidel. The teaching of Islam that says that you will kill the infidel. Remember that in chapter 5 of the Quran, I think it's in verse 47, there is an instruction to all Muslims that says, you will rule among them, and the them refers to the Jews and the Christians, in accordance with God's teachings given to you. Now, in one sentence, we encapsulate the entire problem. First, the concept that they are meant to rule over the infidel, which is, again, contrary to the Constitution.
Which means to take over wherever they go.
Yes,
basically.
yes, and impose Sharia law. And secondly, we have the concept that no other religion counts. You will rule over them in accordance with God's teachings given to you. Those are values and teachings and practices which are antithetical to the United States Constitution. So sometimes I am asked, well, what does that mean? That, you know, we can't have Muslims in America? And my answer is the same. No, we can have Muslims in America, but just like the Mormons and a bunch of other, you know, religions, they have to be limited in their teachings and practices to what the United States Constitution allows. And if they're willing to live within those parameters, fine. If they're not, then they're violating the law and they have to face the consequences. So I'm not preaching something new. We have in our republic a long history, as I say, of United States Supreme Court decisions that defined what the limits of freedom of religion are. And it is not a free-for-all.
Right. It's not what they interpret the Constitution now.
Right.
And the common law is basically laws from the Ten Commandments and from the Bible, basically.
That's correct.
Right? All common sense laws.
That's correct. Because the Constitution itself, the United States Constitution, emanates, it's full of it's based on biblical values.
Right.
And Islam, there's no separation between like their faith and the state. It's
No.
intertwined.
No.
So if we allow them to practice their faith like to the fullest extent, then that automatically seeps into government, which which causes just a Sharia law based government.
That's
and
correct.
institution. So
That's correct.
the
And
consequences would be horrible.
And when Muslims, so if you become a citizen, you swear to uphold the Constitution, correct?
Of course.
So that means they have to abide by the Constitution. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
But, their attitude is always, remember there's a principle in Islam which is called taqiyya. Taqiyya was something that Muhammad practiced when he started his wars against the other Arab tribes and eventually conquered them all and then expanded north into Egypt and Tunisia and the Middle East and so forth. Taqiyya was something that he practiced, which was when you lie to your enemy in furtherance of Islam,
That's right.
you are blessed.
Wow.
I've heard of that.
So we see the practice of taqiyya even in modern day America. Many times they will lie, in their relations when they go and they lobby congressmen and senators, etc. They lie willfully about their true intentions. And in their mind frame, they are blessed when they do this.
They're doing it for their God.
Yes, but we don't get it because we don't understand the background of Islam. They also, modern day Islam continues to operate in complete violation of the UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There are 57 member nations in the United Nations which are Islamic majority countries. 56 are independent nations, and the 57th is a Palestine authority. Now, to be admitted as a member of the United Nations, you have got to, as a nation, it's like signing a treaty. You have got to promise that you will abide by the UN Charter, that you will abide by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and a whole lot of other conventions of the United Nations that have to do with equal rights for women, equal rights for religion, etc. Do they? No, they don't.
No.
We all know that.
Yeah.
And it is a wonder to me why the United Nations doesn't clamp down and say, no, I'm sorry, you signed as a nation a precondition for your admission into the United Nations that you would abide by these regulations. So I'll give you just a simple example. It's not only about women. Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says there shall be freedom of religion, and then it goes on to say, and specifically freedom to enter a religion and leave a religion. Well, we all know that if you are a Muslim and you attempt to leave the religion, you are condemned to death.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's right.
So this is a flagrant violation of the UN treaties, and yet not only does not anybody say anything about it, but we see Muslim-majority countries playing a key role in, for example, the United Nations Human Rights Commission, which is a complete irony.
That's a joke.
And which also led President Trump to withdraw from it, because he said this doesn't represent human rights here.
And they have no problem condemning Israel and accusing
Right.
Israel of violating human rights when they defend themselves.
Of course. But, go and see what happens if you attempt to put a Christian church in even Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You'll be
You
killed.
can't.
So
Yeah.
do you, out of all the dangers to the U.S. and the U.S. Constitution, do you think the teaching of Islam is our biggest threat, or do you think like communism?
I think that you can teach Islam. They're both big threats. And by the way, the forces of Islam in America have combined with the communists.
That was my next question,
Wow.
actually.
So they have a common front.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
But if the issue is, can Islam be taught in America? I would say yes, but then the curriculum has got to include a heavy section on where and how it violates the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah.
That has to be made clear.
Yeah.
So as I say, the Mormons, they had to conform after 1878, after the Reynolds case. The Native American Church, and it's teaching about the use of peyote, had to conform.
And if they want to practice the Quran, then they can go to a country that allows that stuff, but not here in this country.
Yes, but you see the whole point, of course, with that, it's to an Islamist that is a negligible, discardable statement, because they know perfectly well what they're up to, and what they're up to is imposing Sharia law all over the world.
Exactly.
Wow. To rule in the midst.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Wow.
So they're not. In other words, they're not about to go to another country.
Yeah.
They're working on this country.
That's right.
So they are
From
very intentionally
underneath.
doing this. Very
You know,
that's crazy.
much is made of jihad, and people talk about jihad and the terrorists and the violence. The most dangerous version of jihad is civilization jihad. It's not the violent jihad. It's the jihad that seeps in and corrupts from underneath, little by little. It's like, you might have heard the story that if you put a frog in cold water in a pot, and then you turn up the heat,
That's right, yeah.
little by little, it ends up boiling to death because somehow it doesn't realize the danger.
Yeah.
But if you put it directly into boiling water, it'll jump out.
That's right, yeah.
So civilization jihad is the same kind of thing.
So they basically come in, and because they have big families, so they basically
Right.
just infiltrate with their families, whereas especially the culture nowadays, we have abortions, and their families have
Yeah.
one or two kids. Wow,
and
that's
there,
a
and,
big
there, and
point.
there are other problems, there's also, as we all know, a lot of intermarriage between first cousins, for example, in Islam. And there are very conclusive statistics that I looked at some time ago from Scandinavian countries, for example, in Europe, that show that there are Muslim minority populations in those countries, because they've come in as immigrants and so forth, have health problems which are genetic to a much, much higher percentage degree than the native Danish population, for example. And why? It's because of the intermarriage.
Interesting.
So it's a very, its teachings and practices are very, very dangerous. Now, the United States Constitution does not interdict marriage between cousins, but in Islam it happens. And, you've got to also, when we talk about women, I'll give you another example. In the Quran, it says that if a woman brings a charge of rape against a man, it has to go to a religious court. And there must be 4 male eyewitnesses to the rape. Now, this raises the obvious question, well, if they were eyewitnesses, why didn't they do something to stop it?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Now, what happens, and cases like that have taken place in Pakistan, is, in the Islamic world, the family is kept in a very close circle. And, if a woman from the family goes out, she must be escorted by a brother or an uncle or a cousin or something like that. So there have been cases in Pakistan, I repeat, where the cousin or the uncle raped the girl. And the girl dared to speak up and say, I was raped. And it went to a mullah, to a religious court. And the girl was not able to prove that there were 4 eyewitnesses, male eyewitnesses. But the cousin who raped her or the uncle who raped her was married. Now what happens? Watch this. She has now admitted adultery. She has to be stoned to death.
Oh my goodness.
It is an incredible mess.
It's so sad.
That is very sad.
So basically, the girls know it, and if they get raped, they have no recourse. Because the Quran says there must have been 4 male eyewitnesses.
So most of them probably stay silent.
Yeah, they stay
They
silent.
don't say anything.
They stay silent.
Wow. It just continues to happen.
So it's a very oppressive system.
So, because you were born in Greece, right? And you
Yes.
became a citizen of the United States. You're a dual citizen.
Yes.
I don't know, I guess, much of the Greece.
I'm an American.
You're an American.
I made my choice.
Hey.
It was, as I say, I was born in Greece, but I'm an American by choice.
That's awesome. Patriot. American patriot.
That's correct.
So with the Greece Constitution, I don't know if that's a Christian constitution, but how does the Islam teachings, how is that compatible with the Greece
With the Greek Constitution?
Constitution?
Well, the Greek Constitution, it's not. and it's not compatible either with the European Union rules and regulations. You know, with because Greece is part of the European Union,
I got
it was the 10th member nation, and there are, I think, 27 or something like that today. But the European Union, of course, does not preach the enslavement of women, the debasement of women, the killing of homosexuals, human slavery, and all the other, teachings and practices of Islam. So Islam is antithetical to European laws as well.
Wow. Okay. So I don't know if you have more questions with Islam, but because I wanted to ask him a question with the Knights again, I guess.
Yeah, no, go for it.
So I guess like back to the order of the Knights of Malta. Like, how did you get involved in all of that, or how did you get exposed to that?
Well, my late mother was a dame of the order, and that's how I found out about it and became involved with it. And I eventually joined it in the early 1990s, and eventually was elected to lead it by the senior knights in accordance with the age-old statutes of the order.
Wow.
So is that in America? Are you the leader?
Worldwide.
Oh, worldwide. Okay.
Worldwide.
Wow, that's awesome.
Wow. And you had, I understand you had like some legal battles as well with the whole emblem of the Knights of Malta.
Yes, unfortunately, and it wasn't, within the spirit of Christianity, but the order that is under the Vatican attacked us in the last 10 years twice in federal court, essentially claiming that they are the one and only genuine order, and that we were in effect an imposter and had no right to use the Maltese cross, which is the 8-pointed cross. The 8 points represent the 8 Beatitudes from the Sermon on the Mount.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And so they attacked us in federal court, and we defended. Both times we defended our order, and both times they lost in the federal district court, and then they appealed, and they lost on appeal. So they've now gone a bit quiet, but it was interesting during those proceedings. We were able to expose to the court a number of inconsistencies that characterized their position. So they claimed in court that they were the one and only, and we pointed out to the court one of the things that I mentioned earlier. We said their order is only open to Catholics, Your Honor, but that is not the spirit of the order. The Catholic Church did not officially come into existence until 1054 A.D. It was called the Great Schism.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, in 1054, up until 1054, there was one Christian ecumenical church that was ruled by what they called, or led by what they called the Pentarchy. Who were the Pentarchy? The 5 heads of the Christian church. Who were they? The Patriarch of Constantinople, of Antioch, of Jerusalem, of Alexandria, and the Bishop of Rome. A bishop is 2 ranks down from a patriarch. You have bishop, then you have archbishop, and in the Catholic Church, then they also have cardinal, and then you have a patriarch. So in 1054, the Christian Church was ruled by these 5 co-heads, with the Patriarch of Constantinople and the Bishop of Rome generally acknowledged to have, let's say, half a step precedence over the other 3. And so in 1054, the Bishop of Rome pulled himself away from the other 4 leaders of the Christian Church by invoking a Holy Synod and claiming that there were substantial spiritual differences between Rome and the Eastern Church. How serious and how important were these differences? I will tell you from the historical record because I study that. One of the serious, according to the Bishop of Rome, differences was that it is wrong to make the sign of the cross up, down, right, left, as the Eastern Church continues to do, but that you have to make it up, down, left, right.
Oh, my goodness.
And he had all kinds of spiritual justifications for this very, very important point, which I'm sure if Jesus had heard about, he would have been completely overwhelmed, or underwhelmed, actually, by the argument. A second point that they raised is their difference from the Nicene Creed. The Nicene Creed, which was adopted in 325 AD, just as Christianity It was 12 years after Christianity had been established by Constantine the Great, who was Roman emperor and the first emperor of Byzantium at the same time. And in 313, he issued the Edict of Milan, which said that Christianity was now the official religion of the Roman Empire. And then he moved the seat of the empire from Rome. He moved it east to what had been called Byzantium up until that time and was now renamed Constantinople, in other words, the city of Constantine. And today it's called Istanbul, which is a Turkish corruption of the word Constantinople. So in the Nicene Creed in 325 AD, when it came to the definition of the Holy Spirit, the Nicene Creed says that the Holy Spirit derives his sanctity from the Father. In 1054 AD, the Bishop of Rome, when he convoked this Holy Synod, that was a second theological point that he claimed or invoked. He said, no, the Holy Spirit derives his sanctity from the Father and the Son. And in Latin, which is the language that they spoke, it came to be known as the filioque. Filio means son.
Okay.
Filioque means of the Son. The filioque controversy, where the Bishop of Rome basically said, we disagree with the Eastern Church, the Holy Spirit derives his sanctity from the Father and the Son. Again, I find that an argument that would have been completely underwhelming to our Lord Jesus.
Yeah.
And then there was a third that I forget right now. So on the basis of those, he split the Roman Church from the other four heads of the church.
And that's where the Catholic Church formed.
And that's where the Catholic... So to come back to your question, when we went to court, we had the Vatican order saying to the judge, Your Honor, we are the one and only, we are the original. And we said, Your Honor, all you have to do is do an elementary study of history and you'll see that they are only for Catholics. And that is not true to the spirit of the order. The order was founded as a Christian ecumenical order. And there were various other arguments. They claimed, of course, they made a big deal out of the word sovereign in their name, and they kept saying to the judge, we are a sovereign order, we are a sovereign nation. And so the judge finally, who was a very experienced district court judge, more than 30 years on the bench, said to them, excuse me, I understand the word sovereign to mean certain things. So he said, I will ask you a series of rapid-fire questions to which I require rapid-fire answers. I don't want essay-type answers. I want rapid-fire answers. Do you understand? He said to their lawyer. He said, yes, Your Honor. So he said, do you have a population in your sovereign state? So he tried to wiggle around. And eventually he said, no. Do you have an army? No. Do you have the right to tax anybody? No. Do you have the right to issue passports that are recognized by the international community? No. And so it was obvious. What sovereign nation? And he said, what does your sovereignty consist of? What is your territory? So they said, our headquarters building on Via Condotti in Rome. So then we had the right to cross-examine. So we said now to their lawyer, who, by the way, when you're in court proceedings and you have a key witness, the first thing you do is, if he's your witness or she is your witness, you read their credentials into court. So you say, this is a famous professor of a university in history, et cetera, et cetera. You read those credentials. Yep. So they had read his credentials into the court record, and he was an international law lawyer. He said that he practices U.S. law, but also European law and foreign law. He understands it all. Mm-hmm. So when it was our chance to cross-examine him on this particular issue, we said, is it not true that if you are a sovereign nation recognized by the international community, for example, the French embassy in Washington, you're exempt from local taxes? You're exempt. None of the embassies in Washington or foreign countries pay local taxes, nor do American embassies in foreign countries pay local taxes. So he said, yes, absolutely. So we said, well, in that case, why does your building, which you claim on Via Condotti in Rome to be sovereign territory, pay taxes in Rome? So he said, we don't pay taxes in Rome. So we said, Your Honor, we're now introducing 3 documents from 3 successive years from the municipality in Rome, which prove that they are paying taxes in Rome.
Wow.
And that is antithetical to the claim that they're sovereign.
Right.
And so then he blushed and got all upset and everything and was looking at them, but he could not deny it because we had the evidence. And so eventually he kind of tried to recover, and he said, well, Your Honor, this must be because we rent out the ground floor of our building to various shops like Gucci and Montblanc. And so, of course, we came back and we said, well, Your Honor, so now it turns out that their sovereignty doesn't consist of a nation with tens of thousands of square miles and a population and an army and the right to tax. It consists of a building, but in fact, it doesn't even consist of the entire building. It consists of certain rooms on the second floor.
It's a good argument.
Yeah, it's a good argument.
And of course, the judge got it.
Yeah, you got it.
And then we said, Your Honor, they've told you that they issue passports which are recognized by the international community as part of their argument that they are sovereign. And so on cross-examination with their lawyer, we said, well, now you're based in Rome, according to all your documents, your websites, etc., and Rome is Italy, which is the European Union. So you claim that you have a sovereign base in Rome and that you issue passports which are internationally recognized. So we said to him, do you know what the Schengen Treaty is? And he knew. The Schengen Treaty, for your understanding, was the treaty that all the member nations of the European Union signed that regulates their foreign relations. So since they had banded together as the European Union, it became necessary to also have a treaty between themselves regulating their affairs with the rest of the world, right? So we said, and he said, yes, I am familiar. And so we produced a copy of the treaty, and we said, do you recognize that this is the treaty? And so he leafed through it, and he said, yes. And we said, now, when it comes to passports, would you please read Chapter A of the treaty that defines what passports are recognized by the European Union? So we pointed him to the page, and we said, do you see a long list of nations there whose passports are recognized? He said, yes. So we said, do you see your name in it?
And of course
on that list.
Yeah.
So he was searching and searching, and Belgium was there, and Holland was there, and the United Kingdom was there, and Italy was there, but they were nowhere to be found.
Oh.
So eventually he had to say to the court, no, we don't. So we said, would you now turn, please, to Chapter C of the treaty? So he turned to Chapter C. Would you read into the court record what the title of the chapter is? And the title of the chapter was Fantasy Passports. And we said, do you see a short list of so-called nations on the fantasy list? And he said, yes, I do. Do you see your name there? And he said, yes, I do. So it is fair to say that not only are your passports not recognized, actually the European Union, which is where you are headquartered, classifies your passports as fantasy passports.
Wow. That's embarrassing.
Completely.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we, by God's grace, because he was really guiding us and revealing evidence to us, etc., some of which I've described to you, we won the case. They appealed. They lost. Then in 2018, they came back. They sued us, or one of our appurtenances at the time, our Grand Prairie of Florida. They sued it, and they lost again. And then it went for review to a higher court, and they lost again. So, yeah, unfortunately, they've been attacking us. But the funny thing about all of this is that when it comes to evangelical Christians, many of them have heard of the Vatican Order. And, of course, they do not approve. And when they hear of us, they confuse us, the Ecumenical Order, with the Vatican Order. So sometimes I have come to our office in Palm Beach in Florida and checked our messages, and there will be a message from a brother in Christ calling from Iowa or somewhere like that in good faith and saying, well, I don't know if you know this and quite understand it, but you are aligning yourself with the devil because, this is all under the Vatican. And, and it is, amusing to try to explain to them. We'll try to call back, if they've left a number and say, look, please read the record. We are the Ecumenical Order. They've been attacking us for 10 years in court. Yeah. And losing, so we have nothing to do with them. Right. And in fact, we say so on our website. We differentiate. And of course, when we, as part of that first trial, one of the things that they said to the court is they said, this is an imposter order, and all they try to do is to identify themselves in the eyes of the public with us. And so I was our chief witness. And I said, Your Honor, nothing could be farther from the truth. We don't want anything to do with them.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thanks so much. I think our time is pretty much up. So this was such a pleasure. I
Yeah,
could
it
listen
really
to you all
was.
day.
Yeah.
It's just a source of wisdom. But before we end, do you want to leave our audience with like a website or something where they could donate for your cause, or something you want?
Well,
them
we
to
do
tune
have a
into?
website which is under redesign right now, but the website is www.knightshospitalers.org. Knights, of course, spelled with a K, K-N-I. So www.knightshospitalers.org. And when you go to the homepage, there's a donate box, and if you click on that, you can make a tax-deductible donation to the order. We have a 501c3 in America into which these donations go, so you would get a tax deduction.
Okay.
And by the way, in terms of, because I didn't really speak that much about the modern day function of charity, we continue to do that. We've donated tens of millions of dollars worth of medicine and medical supplies. Last year, we were fortunate enough to send medicines and medical supplies to Beirut after that explosion, if you remember, that took place in the port area, which was it was a Hezbollah warehouse. And they were storing in that warehouse rocket fuel for their missiles and, ammunition, etc. And it apparently got to be 110 degrees or something in the warehouse, and it exploded. The unfortunate thing is that, that's in the port area, and the port area in Beirut is actually the Christian neighborhood.
Oh.
So Christians were disproportionately damaged affected by that explosion. So we sent medicines and medical supplies to a local hospital there to help with their needs. So we're always active in that sector, but we're not by far the biggest in the world. To us, the most important function continues to be advocacy for Judeo-Christian values and persecuted Christians, etc.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all you do.
Yes.
Blessings on your journey.
Thank you.
Yeah, go to www.knightshospitalers.org. It's a great cause to donate. And thanks for tuning in. God bless you.
God bless.